Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual, and just a show note and reminder that you should sign up for the newsletter. I don't mean to hawk this too much, but YouTube is dicey, right? So you can sign up for the newsletter and show updates, or you can sign up for just the show updates. So I want to get that out of the way. So let's get into the news. Let's not waste too much time. China seems to be a big deal, right? China's a big deal. Defense Chief Harjit Sajjan testifies that he had no idea Chinese military was hosted at a Canadian army base, including PLA, People's Liberation Army. Major General. I wasn't aware, says Sajjan. Wow, he wasn't aware? Really? I mean, like, there was a lot of press about it, right? It was Justin Trudeau who had invited China's People Liberation Army, says the Toronto Sun, to send its troop for cold weather training at CFB Petawawa in Ontario. And when Canadian Armed Forces, CAF, canceled the training following China's kidnapping of Canadian citizens Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, we heard that Prime Minister raged at the Canadian Armed Forces for doing so. Wow, very interesting, right? Here is the Western Journal confirmed Chinese troops on Canadian soil during military exercises. This was in 2018, right? In a shocking revelation, Canada's Department of National Defence has confirmed that it allowed Communist China's army onto Canadian soil to observe its winter training exercises in February 2018, the Toronto Sun reported. Yeah, very, very crazy. Here is the Hindustan Times, yes. And they say the Trudeau government invited the Chinese army for training in Canada last year, just months after the arbitrary arrest of two Canadians, including a former diplomat, and was miffed when the military canceled the drill. Media reports have said, citing documents, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, had been invited for joint training at Canadian Forces Base, CFB Petawawa, in the province of Ontario. The exercise was cancelled by Canadian Armed Forces to the chagrin of the government, according to the documents cited by the Globe and Mail, Rebel News, and other media outlets. A Department of Defense official stated in a document, quote, "The winter training will not take place this winter. Further options have not been considered. Instructions from a general were that the department tailor a message that the training could not be conducted, quote, at this time." However, a note from the Trudeau government to the armed forces indicated its displeasure over the cancellations. Given the heightened scrutiny, any decision by Canada to reduce or cut ties should be carefully considered to avoid sending any unhelpful or unintended messages, it said. Right? It's very interesting, the level of access given to PLA and China to training, just to observe our training. That seems odd, right? Canadian soldiers no longer training Chinese troops, Defense Minister says in December of 2020. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan has confirmed Canadian soldiers are no longer training members of the Chinese military amid scrutiny following a report that senior civil servants opposed a decision last year to stop training activities with the regime. A report by the Globe and Mail on Thursday cited documents mistakenly released under access to information laws, which said Global Affairs Canada pushed back at the decision by the Chief of Defence Staff General Jonathan Vance last year to cancel the training. The training was set to see Canadian soldiers train Chinese soldiers in winter services at CFB Petawawa. And the training had taken place at another time, right? So how long and how often was this planning on going on? Was it going to continue to go on indefinitely until somebody said, no, this is no good, and made big news out of it? Who knows? Who knows? I certainly don't. I don't at all. Very interesting stuff going on. Okay, getting into the governance of the country. This came out yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. No, 2 days ago, April 12th. Blacklock's reporter is reporting federal court repeals Christmas and rewrites 1998 rules to rename December observance as seasonal recess. So it's no longer a Christmas recess, it's a seasonal recess. Welcome to post-national state Canada, right? Slowly removing the history that made us who we are, so they can just, make us into whatever they want us to be in the future, right? Welcome to our post-national state. An alternate headline, says Rex Glacier, why Quebec Bloc Party supported Trudeau in shutting down the investigation into Trudeau, Sajjan, Vance sexual abuse and the military. In exchange for the $6 billion Canada government financing, Air Canada agreed to, among other things, complete the purchase of 33 Airbus A-22 aircraft produced by Airbus, formerly Bombardier, facility in Quebec. So it's interesting. That's an interesting little piece of information to connect the dots with regards to the airplane and Air Canada bailout, airline industry bailout, and money going to connected Quebec enterprises, right? Like very, very interesting how that works in Canada. It just keeps working and working and working, right? And people say you have to do everything you can for Canadian jobs except small businesses. Those can remain closed because lockdown. And if you don't agree, you're, almost a terrorist, a white supremacist terrorist, right? That's what they're trying to push. That's what they're trying to push. That's what they're trying to say. It's very interesting how the money makes the Quebec go round, right? Pierre Polyev says, want to build a warehouse or to create jobs? Here is the wait time for permits. In South Korea, 28 days. Singapore, 36 days. Denmark, 65 days. Finland, 65 days. Toronto, 249 days. Sorts CD Howe Institute testifying at Industry Committee on the gatekeeper economy. And Mr. Polyev made a speech about this yesterday, talking about how instead of utilizing the private sector to make positive environmental impacts, delivering people into the financial district instead of dropping them off at Pearson and making them drive all the way down downtown to wherever their destination is, and other job creating factories, right? And all of their policies are set, they being the Liberals, are set to set up gatekeepers and money, because it's not just days that you can't operate. Every day lost means revenue lost, right? If you're like, I have the money in the capital to start this factory, and the faster we get going, the faster everything starts churning and the money starts working properly, and I've got this money to invest right here in my hand, and the quicker things work, and then you have to wait almost a year, 250 days, right? 8 months. Wow, that's a lot, right? 8 months, 7 months. But all of that is lost productivity, lost potential revenue for the employer, lost potential wages for potential employees. All of that stuff, it costs money, right? And so it's not so good, right? It's not so good. It's not great policy. It doesn't work well, right? To get things out the door and moving, it doesn't work well. The federal public service has swelled by roughly 10,000 bureaucrats per year under Trudeau to roughly 380,000 today. Costs for consultants hired by the government rise by $6 billion under the Liberals. Big, bloated, expensive government. Yeah, it is. That's exactly what's happening. And the more people who depend on the government, and the more people who haven't lost a paycheck in this whole thing, the more people are likely to just say, oh, it was handled just fine, right? And they don't think about all of the potential problems of, all of the restaurants in the city that you live. If they all go under, what are you left with? Taco Bell, right? Like it's Demolition Man, right? The only thing that survives are the multinationals that survived outside of Canada, because nobody else could run a restaurant that kept closing and could only serve 2 people, right? It's wild. Or the food production, right? Temporary foreign workers. We'll get to food production. I've had an email, and thank you for sending it. You're on my list to respond back to. I appreciate the information. I've got questions before I dig into it on the show here, but temporary foreign workers impact business too, right? And food costs, right? Like if somebody has to spend money to put a temporary foreign worker up in a hotel for 2 weeks when they arrive in Canada, and you're depending on them to make sure that your product can get to market, right? Without them, the product rots and you make no money. Again, business, like fundamentals of business 101. So you have to pay this money, and it has to come out of your profit. It's a direct removal, a direct attack on small businesses, right? So again, and farming is a small business. It's a risk. I'm going to make this product here, and they're going to give me money, and out of the money I'm going to be able to feed my family and buy other products, not just the thing that I'm making here, other products that I need, and including to continue making this product that I sell, right? And it breaks things down, right? It's bad governance, it's bad policy, and they don't want to change tactics, because this is getting the results they want. They want the carbon tax to impact the farmers. They want I don't know exactly why, but this is what they want. Right? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know why. Okay, back to the tabs. Why is an entire province being held hostage by the unions of one industry, the teachers? The education industry and the teachers unions. I could see this happening when we had a Liberal premier, since that party is so beholden to the teachers unions. But why is Ford Nation cowering before them? It's an interesting question, isn't it? You would think that with all of the data around schools and the safety of other places that are operating their schools in a different way than Ontario is operating its schools, including in Canada, right, including in BC, you would think that there would be more pressure on Doug Ford, who's a conservative, like a progressive conservative premier, to have the schools open, but he doesn't seem to be hearing any of that. The only thing he hears is from the science table. We'll talk about that in the Rumble part of the show, but it seems very interesting. It bears considering, right? Why do the unions wield so much power over Doug Ford? Is that really what's going on? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, but I don't know. Interesting question. Okay, lockdowns, because we are in a lockdown. When you hear lockdown, do you think opportunity? When you hear COVID-19, do you think, man, we could really make some hay on this, right? I could invest $5 and turn that baby into $1 million, right? No? Yes? Maybe? I don't know, right? I don't think opportunity when I hear COVID-19, but here's our Deputy Prime Minister, and she hears opportunity, right? She hears opportunity knocking. Hello. Here we go.
I really believe COVID has created a window of political opportunity and maybe an epiphany.
An epiphany. Oh, right. All we needed was to tell them that they were all going to be very, very sick unless they followed exactly what we said. And then what we said was very draconian. And Yahtzee, it worked. Right? Epiphany. We can make big changes to affect, big reforms that we want and that the public doesn't want. In other news, London, Ontario meat plant shut for 2 weeks amid COVID-19 outbreak affecting 82 workers. They're shutting down food production. Right? I was talking just before about how increasing costs on the farmers in the front end, just in the production, will impact the ability for that farmer to get the product to market. But once the product gets to market, there's all sorts of other barriers too, shipping costs, right, and all of that. But here, the meat plants, when the farmers have a cow or a product that's ready to go, ready for slaughter, I don't know that you have a lot of extra time. I don't know that you can hold them for 2 weeks. I don't know what the ins and outs of that are, but it seems to me that if you have a 2-week delay, that's going to be difficult, and it's going to impact pricing, and it's going to impact other things. Using COVID-19, normalizing the use of COVID-19 to shut down food production, and normalizing COVID-19 to have a perilous effect on, or an increasing effect on the costs of food production is bad policy, right? It's bad policy. That doesn't, like, if somebody said to you A plus B equals bad, you would hope that they would change that. But instead of changing it, what are they doing? Ignoring it. They're ignoring it, and they're doubling down on it, saying, you know what? Also, in addition to all of that, you should pay carbon taxes on everything too. And what else do you do? Yeah, pay carbon taxes on the taxes too. You pay carbon tax on the GST. We'll total it up, including the GST, and then we'll add the carbon tax, because math is great like that. Compound works wonders, right? It is punishing, and it's not appropriate. It's just as punishing as locking down restaurants intermittently. It's just as punishing as like saying, hey, Easter weekend's going to be great. Oh, right, you're locked down, and sorry, we didn't mention that a few days ago when you were getting product because you thought we were going to be open, right? It's as punishing as telling the hair salon people, you guys can open on April 12th. Ha ha, right? My Stream Deck has crashed. Otherwise, I would do my but I'll have to fix that in a minute. But anyway, regardless, it's punishing, and it's not good. It's not positive for business. It's the government breaking their promise. It's the government reneging on their contract, and that's not good. Step outside tonight, says Viva Fry. Step outside tonight and you'll fully appreciate that Francois Legault hasn't won the war against COVID. He's won the war against Quebec. He has taken everything from the citizens and delivered nothing. So people aren't happy, and it's not just Ontario people who aren't happy. It's everybody people who aren't happy. Here's Roman Baber, and he's asking about the number of people in the ICU. We've talked about this the last couple of days. Roman Baber is asking in the Ontario legislature, what's the number? And the answer that he gets is less than satisfactory. And that's frustrating. So here we go.
To the Minister of Health. Speaker, the Minister locked down our province and is now risking the lives of thousands of Ontarians by cancelling surgeries to preserve intensive care units from being overwhelmed. So Ontarians deserve to know. They deserve some clarity about the number of available and occupied ICU beds. And I'm only talking about ICU beds now. I'm not looking for an answer on acute care beds or the 3,100 acute care beds they built last year. But the real ICU numbers right now. Critical Care Services says Ontario has 2,412 ICU beds, 2,412. On the weekend, CCSO showed 1,851 patients in Ontario's ICUs. That puts provincial ICU occupancy at 76%. My question to the Minister, am I correct? Just over 2,400 beds, 1,851 patients on the weekend equals 76% provincial ICU capacity. And if I'm incorrect, which one of those numbers I cited is wrong, and what is the real number? And if I am correct, then please confirm that Ontario's ICU occupancy before she cancelled surgeries was under 80%.
The parliamentary assistant and member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. You know, from the start of the pandemic, our government's top priority has been to protect the health and well-being of all Ontarians, and in response to escalating case counts, which have led to increased hospitalizations and ICU occupancy rates, which are already over the peak of the wave 2, our government has implemented a stay-at-home and declared a state of emergency. And the stay-at-home order and other new and existing public health and workplace safety measures will preserve our public health system capacity, safeguard our vulnerable populations, and allow for more progress to be made with vaccinations to save lives. I'd like to remind the member opposite that to ensure that everyone who requires care in a hospital receives the high-quality care that they know and expect, we've invested $1.8 billion in the hospital sector for 2021-22.
Okay, so she didn't answer the question, and I want to make it really clear. Like she was asked, "Am I correct in saying that this number is under 80%?" So 1,800 and change to 24 and change, 2412. That's 76%. That's right. That's under 80%. Is it correct that you canceled surgeries when the ICUs were under 80% to preserve the ICU capacity? Why couldn't she answer the question? I know why she couldn't answer the question. Okay, Liberals don't answer questions they don't like. And in this case, it's a conservative Liberal, but it's a Liberal no less. They don't answer questions they don't like. So in this case, instead of engaging, she dodges the question and moves on to say we're providing health care and we need to preserve this and blah, 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 blah. I don't know that this is helpful. It's not a good thing to it's not a good thing to dodge questions. It doesn't lend credibility. It says that there's more questions than answers, right? And that's problematic when you're trying to run a province in lockdown, right? People just don't like that. A friend of mine was saying, just as a quick aside, a friend of mine was saying, like, I think people will start standing up and people are just starting to resist. That's the problem. They're boiling the frog. It's never going to get to a breaking point because anytime it gets to, people have different breaking points. So anytime it gets to a close to a breaking point for somebody, 100 other people are like, yeah, well, it's been like this for a while, right? The thing is, taken all together, consider the freedoms we had last year, even in the pandemic last year, and compared to now. And it's shocking what's changed. If you look at the removal of our freedoms, the removal of our speech rights, the removal of the accountability for the people who are making the decisions, the medical officers of health, and I'll get to that in the next segment, actually. If you look at all of that and understand that we've been removed from the process of governing in favor of a science table that's not really looking at any kind of science that they're transparent about. They're not clear about what they're looking at or what metrics they're measuring. And that's problematic for the public to measure their success, right? And so the lockdowns and all of that are causing a situation where people are adapting. It's the boiled frog, and we're boiling now, right? Like, you see, that's the point I'm trying to make. We're boiling now. Okay, back to this. Here's another Black Lives Matter comparison, right? Outland North Bay allowed to stay open despite stay-at-home order, right? Some things are allowed to function, right? The S2 or the 2SLB LGBTQ plus space Outland North Bay, a hub aimed at supporting trans and queer youth, has been deemed essential by the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit and is allowed to stay open during the province-wide stay-at-home order. I present that without comment. Lockdown fatigue is giving way to protest and defiance across the country. With protests breaking out in different parts of the country and some businesses flatly refusing to follow COVID-19 health orders, lockdown fatigue is giving way to lockdown rage more than a year into the pandemic. On Sunday, hundreds of people weathered the ice and chills to protest the closure of Edmonton area Grace Life Church that has been ignoring public health rules for months. On the other side of the country, windows were smashed and garbage torched in Old Montreal as protesters rejected the province's latest curfew rules, calling for freedom for the young. I scroll down a bit. The evidence is everywhere in casual conversations with friends, family, and businesses defying public health orders such as Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, which has refused to close despite visits from public health and officials, or the hair salon in Barrie, Ontario, which also defied orders to close despite threats of fines. There's businesses that I've reported on as well in Guelph and around Ontario that are defying the lockdown orders. Even in the corridors of power last week, 17 United Conservative Party members of the Alberta legislature spoke out against the most recent round of provincial restrictions in a very public airing of internal dissent among the 63 UCP MLAs. On Monday, Maxime Bernier, leader of the Fringe People's Party of Canada, addressed a crowd at the Alberta legislation in Edmonton, where someone held a Western Independence Party flag and protesters chanted "Lock her up" in reference to Dr. Dina Hinshaw, the province's chief medical officer of health. Do you see the positioning they're placing there? I'm reading that to show you the positioning. The Fringe Party use the use of the "Lock her up" chant referenced. I can't. If they did that. I can't imagine it not being encouraged by a provocateur of some kind, or maybe even the news person themselves who wanted to write those words, because they're trying to use that to that's a Hillary Clinton Trump thing. They're trying to tie that to even subconsciously they're trying to make that connection. And right or wrong, whether it happened or not, whether it was manufactured or not, there you go, right? And they use that to discredit the rest of the message. That's the point. Okay. Bernier has been touring British Columbia and Alberta calling for an end to lockdowns. He said the protest is an ideological revolution and rallied against business closures, mask laws, curfews, and as yet non-existent vaccine passports. I'm saying no to show me your papers, said Bernier. I'm saying yes to our freedoms, to who we are as Canadians. I'm glad they quoted him correctly. Like, that sounds pretty good. As the rally came to a close, there were a lot of chants of freedom in the square in front of the legislature building. In Montreal, meanwhile, police said 7 people were arrested and 107 tickets related to public health violations were given out Saturday evening to protesters. Nationally, the RCMP said they've issued 129 fines related to the Federal Quarantine Act since March 2020. Interesting that they're giving like total numbers of fines, right? Like, oh, just in case you were wondering. Okay, school closures. Ontario parents started a legal challenge against school closures. I was researching doing this. I was looking into doing this. I talked to some people who would be very knowledgeable about this, some lawyers even. And basically the wisdom given to me was that the Section 22 order, and I think I mentioned this in the show, the Section 22 order was executed against the Board of Educators, like the directors of education. So Martha Rogers, the people at the very top. The only people who could then challenge this Section 22 order are the people at the very top. Even if a couple of principals, let's say 6 or 7 principals were like, this is really damaging, it's really terrible for the kids and we don't agree with this, we're going to challenge the Section 22 order. That would not be enough. They would not have standing. And how do I know that? Because a parent tried to bring this exact case. They got further than I did, or they didn't have as good a lawyer as I did. And they brought it to well, I'll read you the story because it's very interesting. Here we go. Public protests are not working. Contacting my MPP has not done anything. I feel completely powerless, but here there's a bureaucratic appeals process that I can try. That's how Toronto area parent Amos Bitson described the thought process that went into his decision to appeal school closures with a little-known provincial government body called the Health Services and Appeal Review Board, HSARB. It's a legal mechanism that most Ontarians aren't even aware exists, the ability to challenge the orders coming from public health officials. When Toronto Public Health and Peel Public Health shut down all of the schools in their regions, they were acting under the authority of the Section 22 of Ontario's Public Health and Promotion Act. This was widely reported and included in letters sent out to principals and parents, but what wasn't well communicated was the fact that the medical officers are legally obligated to tell parents affected by their orders that they are entitled to request a hearing with the HSARB within 15 days after the order was published. The funny thing is, it wasn't executed on the parents, it was executed on the directors of education. So the directors of education got a notice that said they could appeal, but the parents didn't get a notice that said they could appeal because it wasn't executed on them. So the communication is flawed, and so the case got picked up. Anyway, back to this. Quote, I don't think that it's an accident that the more public-facing notes that said note that was communicated didn't include a note of the appeals process, says Bitson, of the way school closures was communicated. Bitson, whose children attended a North Toronto school, went ahead with an appeal of the order and last Thursday morning he was granted a case number by HSARB and a preliminary hearing that would have taken place on Monday morning. But then late Friday afternoon, over 24 hours after the process got into motion, he received an email abruptly stating that his hearing had been canceled. The HSARB explained that the order from public health was in fact directed at school administrators and that parents do not have the right to appeal the order because it is not aimed at them. It's unknown what happened in the time that elapsed between the HSARB first issuing the hearing and then later denying the hearing, not denying issuing the hearing. The Toronto Sun also heard from another parent who filed an appeal with the HSARB and was turned away. But one Toronto lawyer says Bitson's hearing and others like it should be allowed to go ahead. I think parents should have the standing to challenge it, as their children are the ones paying the price for the school closures, writes Catherine Marshall, an employment lawyer at Milburn and Associates. I think the court should review this and parents should be granted standing to challenge it on behalf of their kids. Marshall says parents should now be directing their concerns to their local school boards, which do have the rights to an appeal board hearing. It would have to go up to the director of education, right? It would have to clear so many hurdles. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm just trying to tell you that if you call, you will be passed off and passed off and passed off, and then somebody will go, "It is noted," and then they'll hang up, and that's it. That's it. Looking at the broader social picture, I don't see anyone adequately weighing the harms and the benefits, says Bitson, of his frustration with school closures. From what we've seen from the data that we have now, it's not clear that closing the schools will really make a difference. While some union activists, and even reporters are under the mistaken impression that schools were closed due to increased transmission of the virus within classrooms, the province's top medical official, Dr. David Williams, and Peel Regional's Dr. Lawrence Lowe have clarified that this is not the case. They both maintain that there has hardly been any in-class transmission in schools and that the closures are more about broader concerns with community spread. Top pediatric experts have previously said that even this approach to school closures is unacceptable based on the actual risk to children, as not a single school-aged child in Ontario has died of COVID-19, and the number of children hospitalized with the virus is lower than it is for influenza. So those are interesting stats, right? Here is Stephen Lisi, and he says, this is Sick Kids Ronald Cohen, and he says, we all want schools open. As Dr. Ronald Cohen says, the CEO of Sick Kids said, when community rates come down, we can safely reopen schools. I don't think that our current PC government has a lot of credibility left. Like 24 hours, yesterday I showed you Stephen Lisi telling parents in the morning that the kids would be going back to school, and then in the afternoon sitting beside Doug Ford while Doug Ford said, no, they won't. So the credibility here just missing just a little tiny bit, right? Ha ha ha. Yeah, I have trouble believing people who consistently end up being wrong, right? Like 5 minutes later, Mr. Lisi releases an updated announcement that says, nope, wrong about that. Sorry. Haha. Something to consider in Ontario. Daycares are allowed to be open, and kids, some of them are already 4, are not in masks all day, but schools are now closed. Ask yourself why. The simple answer: daycares don't have unions. This isn't about science or protecting children. It's about money. It's about money. And so, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Okay, now I'm going to talk about the third wave and all of that other stuff. So we're going to head over to Rumble. If you don't want to join me, that's no problem. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.